All right, welcome. We're going to get started. We have a very jam-packed session, so I want to make sure we have enough time. So we're going to go ahead and get moving. So thank you for joining us today for the webinar, How to De-Escalate Conflict at Work. I'm Sierra Pratt with Star Staffing, and I'll be your webinar host today. And it is my pleasure to welcome back one of our favorite speakers, Dr. Craig Nathanson. Nice to see you, Dr. Nathanson, as always.
Thank you, Sierra. My honor and pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to today's webinar sponsor, Providence. For those who haven't joined us before, Star Staffing is the top staffing and recruiting firm in Northern California. We are excited to be celebrating our 25th year in business this month. You can learn more about our services and access our free resources at starhr.com, or of course, you can reach out to me as well. And the registration is now open for our October webinar, The Skills Revolution, How to Prepare Your Workforce for the Future. So I searched high and low for the right speaker, and I think you're really going to like this session. Matthew Waltz has an impressive background in workforce development, and will be sharing his expertise and tactics for reskilling and training employees for the future. So we'll go ahead and drop that link in the chat, and you can register for free. So be sure to join us for that. All right. And save the date for our signature event, the HR Summit, to be held on March 6, 2024. Dr. Nathanson is a past speaker, I think, of more than one summit, actually. We're currently nailing down topics and looking at speakers, and we'd love to get your thoughts on that. So I'm actually going to launch just a quick poll here to get your thoughts. We'd love to find out what topics you're most interested in learning about. So this should allow you to select multiple topics. If not, just pick your favorite. But just take a moment here and let us know what you're interested in. If none of these are resonating with you, or you have other ideas that you really want to see, feel free to throw those in the chat, or you can email me separately. I'd love to get your thoughts. So please share those, and I'll share this when we're done as well, so you can kind of get an idea of what people are interested in as well. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll give it like 30 more seconds here. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and close it. I feel like they're still coming in, so sorry if you didn't get a chance here. I'm going to share those very briefly. So definitely employee well-being, talent management, productivity are kind of those top three. So thank you so much. And again, feel free to send me any further details or an email if you have other ideas that you want to share. I'd love to hear those. And I'd like to invite all of you as well to subscribe to Star Staffing's monthly newsletter. It's called HR Caffeine. You'll get thought-provoking articles, insights, legal updates, and more straight to your email inbox. You can subscribe for free at starhr.com/resources. We're also going to drop that link in the chat, so feel free to register for that. And now we'd like to thank our sponsor, Providence. Don't think our sponsor was able to make it here today, so I'm going to go ahead and just share a little bit about Providence. Providence is one of the largest regional health networks in the U.S., third largest not-for-profit. Incredible, this institution was founded by the Catholic Sisters over 100 years ago, and Providence serves in 51 hospitals, 1,000 clinics, probably more than that, and offers a comprehensive range of health and social services across 7 states. So pretty large now, really impressive. You can learn more at providence.org. So thank you so much to Providence for joining us and for sponsoring this webinar. We really appreciate it. And of course, this webinar is being recorded. It's approved for 1 HRCI or SHRM credit. We'll be sharing those codes at the end of the session, so you must be present to get that. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome our speaker today, Dr. Craig Nathanson. He is an educator, author, speaker, and coach for midlife development. His primary focus is working with organizations to develop humanistic approaches to working with people for joy and success at work. Dr. Nathanson has been a faculty member in management at the University of San Francisco since 2013 and is responsible for the certificate programs at Sonoma State in human resource management, advanced human resources, professional sustainable skills, and humanistic leadership. Dr. Nathanson has over 20 years of experience in various senior management positions in the US, Fortune 500 companies, and has written and published several books. I could go on and on. Also one of our favorite speakers here at Star Staffing. We get requests for his topics very often. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome Dr. Nathanson to the virtual stage.
Thank you, Sierra, so much. And it's really my pleasure to be with all of you. And I'm really grateful that you took some time out of your busy morning to spend this with me. Before I share some slides and we go through some ideas, let's have a couple quick exercises for your involvement. I'd like you to put into the chat, I'll give you just 30 seconds. When you hear the word conflict, what word comes to mind? So just go ahead and put into the chat, if you would. When you hear the word conflict, what word comes to mind? And I give you 30 seconds. Good. Maybe another 15 seconds or so. Seems that we have a lot of agreement here. Good. Maybe another 6 or 7 seconds. And I'll let all of you take a look yourselves. It seems like there is a lot of agreement about which words kind of resonate with you. And let's do one more exercise. Can you give an example in the chat, just brief, a few words? What are the kinds of conflicts that you see at work these days? What are the kinds of conflicts that, you see at work these days? Just put, a few ideas for us in chat, please. Give you about 30 seconds on this. Good. A lot of consistency here. Another 15 seconds. And everyone just take a few minutes and take a look at what people are writing. You see a lot of similarities. Maybe another 10 seconds. Yes, remote versus non-remote. Okay, just maybe 10 more seconds, just finish up. Good, thank you. Good, so we have good data here, which is a good prerequisite to the start of my talk. Great, so I'm going to share my screen. And we will begin. So I want to cover in this short talk, and I'm going to leave time at the end so we could have Q&A. I'll give you, my understanding when I think of conflict, what that means. We'll talk about some strategies to de-escalate conflict at work. I've seen a lot of conflict come, especially in a post-COVID era, and I want to just discuss that for a few minutes. And we'll discuss some of the common elements that, lead to conflict. And most importantly, we'll come up with some practical steps. I mean, learning is useful if it's practical and you could do something with it. So I expect that all the ideas that we discuss in this next short half an hour or so, you're going to be able to use right away. And I'm going to leave about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. So what is conflict? Well, it looks like all of you had pretty much the same ideas that I have. When I think of conflict, these are the words that pop up for me. And they're strong words. Anxiety. I have some anxiety, probably because I'm sensing some conflict with a situation, or another person. Misunderstanding. Anger is a word that comes up a lot. I'm not getting what I want. Issues, problems. So all of these words represent, in my observations, feelings. And so a lot of conflict is about, obviously it's about issues, but it also comes from feelings. I am upset because, and that's one thing to understand, that when you're working with someone in conflict, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, realize that a lot of their conflict is coming from just how they feel about something, and half the solution is just honoring how they feel. Remember, when we think a thought, it affects how we feel, which affects our behavior. And conversely, when we behave in a certain way, it affects our feeling, how we feel, and then it affects how we think. So our body is a system. But when we're in conflict, a lot of it is feelings. Now, I have noticed in the post-COVID era, the conflicts that were present before, but perhaps some newer conflicts. Certainly during COVID, we all got cozy and used to working at home, and in many cases, we kind of like it. And these days, this is I've been writing about this for years. We're now in the portfolio life of work, where many people have different expectations about their work. They have different streams of income. They're starting their own businesses. They're working part-time as contractors. The bottom line is people have different expectations about how, when, why, and where they work. This can lead to conflict, of course. You've probably heard the term quiet quitting. I've heard quiet hiring lately, recently too. But quiet quitting kind of generated from the Gen Z generation. The idea that, well, this isn't really the job I want. This job isn't really going to give me meaning, but it's money. I'm going to take it. So I'm going to bring my body to work, but I'm going to leave my heart and body at home. And obviously, this can lead to conflict. So more and more people are thus speaking about how they feel about their work environments and their work, especially after COVID. We got used to taking our dog for a walk at 11 a.m. and taking a nap at 2 and picking up the kids at 3. And in some cases, that's not as easy right now. And so people are speaking their voice and expectations about how they want to work, and that can lead to conflict. We also have, what's interesting to me is we have young adults in their, I could say that, in their early 30s that are now, millennials that are now, moving into middle management. And, millennials were raised by baby boomers, the idea that we should, collaborate. And Gen Zers are raised by Gen Xers, and we tend to want to work by ourselves a little bit more. So I'm noticing there can be some tension between the two younger generations, and this can cause some conflict. As some of you said, we have some people working at home, some people working in the office, some people working, back and forth. This can lead to conflict, and just COVID really helped us rethink about the world, the world of work, our world of work. We're less tolerant with autocratic bosses. We're less tolerant with environments that are just not good for our mental health and our physical health. And so all of this leads to conflict, probably good conflict, however, as people start to speak up. And then, I think there's just a lot of unknowns these days in the economy, which is a little bit shaky, I think, right now. Global issues, financial issues, the rise of AI into the workplace, and others. So these are some, I think, extra, as if we didn't need any more elements that can cause conflict. So what are some of the sources of organizational conflict? This is just from my view, and a lot of these you brought up in the chat. One of the reasons I created the humanistic leadership model back in 2015 is I really felt strongly that for people to thrive at work, they have to feel like they're put first. Profit's important, but it's, how you make your profit. Do you make profit by running over people or working with people? And so when, we feel like we don't have leadership at work, this can cause conflict. It leads to fear. There's nothing worse than being at work and being afraid of making a mistake. We want people at work to show courage. We want people at work to take risks, to take positive risks, to really live their authentic lives at work. But when you are fearful of making a mistake and getting punished, this causes you to shut down. And of course, it can lead to conflict. Stress, stress is there. You can't get rid of stress, but you can learn how to minimize stress. And some of us are good at that. Some of us are not so good at that. We need some practice. So when we're under stress, this causes a lot of conflict at work. If I could take a picture of all of you coming to work and looked at those little cartoon bubbles above your head, I would see all of you walking into the door, the virtual or physical door of your office, with lots of things on your mind. Your relationships, your kids, your challenges at home, money, and so on. And you don't necessarily talk about that with people at work, but those are the things you bring to work. So a lot of us, we expect work. We have a lot of unrealistic expectations that work will solve all of our challenges in our life. And when they don't, this can lead to conflict. We have time pressures. The worst thing is to be in a job and not really understand what you're supposed to do. So when our roles are unclear, this can lead to conflict. Talked about work-life balance. About 70% of what we communicate is nonverbal. And yet we spend most of our life on our phones and texting, even at work. And this can lead to a lot of conflict because we have, misunderstanding. If we're not really communicating face to face in all situations, a lot of the communication is lost. Of course, money, organizations that have a lot of competitive approaches to money can lead to conflict. That's why I think it's always important to pay competitive wages. And then once people are in the organization, look at team performance, look at how we can help people collaborate. Don't build a system that conflicts competition and collaboration. So all of that can lead to stress. How about our coworkers? We don't have to like everybody we work with, but we have to learn how to get along, everybody we work with. Before 30, it's important to build ego. That gives us a sense of social identity, self-esteem. If you're under 30 and you go to a party and someone says, "Hey, Craig, what do you do?" And you say, "Well, I'm a manager. I'm an accountant. I am a software engineer." And the other person says, "Cool, this is what I do." And you both walk away happy. But after 30, if someone asks you what you do at a party, I think it's more important to say, "Well, I'm a father. I'm a marathon runner. I like to work in the garden. I like to paint." So in other words, you talk about who you are versus what you do, you see. Anyone could take away what you do. You could just get fired or lose clients, but no one could take away who you are. So after 30, it's important to build humility, to be humble. And often ego stays with us past 30, and it can cause conflict. And of course, we have family challenges and illnesses that come up. And, if we have work environments that are not supportive of this, that can lead to conflict. In the humanistic leadership model that I created, the top tier of the model is to be self-aware. So in other words, you have to really lead yourself before you lead other people. And what does it really mean to be self-aware? I mean, if you went into Google and typed this, you'd probably get 1,000 different answers. But I think it means to understand, what is your purpose in your life? Where is your energy right now? Where do you want to make a difference in the world? What are your values? How do you know if you're following your values? And, how do you know if you're not? So when a person is not self-aware, it's hard to be present for others. And this can lead to conflict. Personality is wired from birth. Studies from personality theory back to the mid-70s show that it's really hard to change personality. But sometimes you have to modify behavior. If you're an introverted person and you get into a conflict with somebody who's an extrovert, there are times when you might have to modify your behavior and be a little more sociable to work the conflict out. And so when we don't know how to modify our behavior, this can lead to conflict at work. Of course, we have, as I mentioned earlier, differences in generation, between generations. I've been writing for 25 years about the importance of joy at work. I believe that the number one indicator to measure at work is the amount of joy that people have. Of course, there are so many other indicators that are important, but I think the most important is to measure one's joy at work, because I've seen in my research and writing that when joy is up, all other business indicators are up and conflict tends to be down. But when people do not enjoy what they're going to spend most of their life doing, that obviously can lead to conflict at work. If people who are in leadership positions in the organization are not humanistic, in other words, they don't really show that they put people first. They're not humane. They don't have empathy. They don't, really support people. This can lead to conflict. When we feel like we're just a widget, we could be replaced at any time. We have different ways of behavior when we work. Some of us are more structural. Some of us are more task oriented. This is part of the HLM model that I like to teach. We all have different styles of working, especially when we lead. and often those styles can clash. When I was a new and older manager, I would take my new groups into a room and I would put on the board everything that I was thinking. Here are my assumptions. We're going to hire this many people this year. We're going to move into this product line. We're going to stop doing this. We're going to start doing this. And then we'd update it a couple of years. In other words, I wanted people to know my assumptions. A lot of times at work, we don't know what our leaders' assumptions are. And as a result, this leads to rumors and stress and conflict. And so this can be a source of conflict. Different values, different schedules. How about just how we take care of ourselves? Have you ever not gotten a lot of sleep on a Sunday night or Monday night, and you say to yourself, "Oh my gosh, how am I going to function today? I'm so tired. I hope nobody talks to me today because I'm really tired." And then you get annoyed when somebody starts to talk to you at work. Well, of course, they don't know that you're tired. Or have you ever said to yourself, "Wow, my diet is really bad. That's why I feel kind of sluggish today. I have such a bad diet." But you don't tell people that at work. And how about exercise? Well, I really should exercise and take care of my physical self, but maybe I'll think about this next week. But meanwhile, you have no energy. You don't tell people that at work that you don't exercise. But my point is, when we don't take care of ourselves, this can lead to conflict at work. That was my point I wanted to make. So I can go on, but what do we do about all of this? I think, like, what I like to tell my students is have a pleasing personality. You be the person that goes out of your way to help others. You don't have to win. Don't get defensive. Learn to compromise. Seek to understand people. Just be nice, and you will be the most popular person at work. I think that's the number one. Number two, secret of success in careers that I would recommend. The first is enjoy what you do. The second is just have a pleasing personality, because everybody will be, want to be around you. I think it's important to get rest. So you have to, this is the idea of, taking care of yourself before you can lead other people. You just have to get rest. You have to take care of yourself. You have to give yourself that downtime. If you're going, you have no downtime, it's going to be hard to take care of others. If you're tired, you don't deal well in conflicts. I think when in conflict with another person, just understand that, they're upset about something. And a lot of it's, their feelings about specific issues. And if you just show them that you just are on their side, try to understand, try to compromise. Listen non-verbally, even more than verbally. Just be curious about people, all of those things. It's hard to argue with someone. It is hard to have a conflict with someone who you perceive as agreeing with you, as wanting to help you. Know your biases. From my research, I don't believe it's possible, although we try, to get rid of our biases. We all have them. It's a collection of our lived life, our lived history. But what's important is to identify what your biases are about situations, about people, and say, aha, these are my biases. Say that to yourself privately. And this is where those biases come from. Okay, now I know I have these biases. And now I'm going to do my best to minimize those biases so that they don't get in the way of others. So often, if we're not aware and think deeply about our biases, obviously this can lead to conflict. And so I think one way to de-escalate conflict is to keep your bias out of it. I also think it's important to stay calm, when you're in a conflict. Now, this takes training. This takes training. Meditation can be very useful. During COVID, I always wanted to meditate my whole life. I knew it would be good for me, but I never can do it. I would sit there and I would maybe chant, it would last about 10 seconds. And then during COVID, I picked up, as an example, I'm not selling this, but I picked up the app Headspace as an example. And through Headspace, I learned to meditate. And I meditate 3 times a day, 10 minutes at a time. And it really changed my life as just an idea of a tool that helps you to learn how to breathe, to learn how to stay calm. In fact, let's do something real quick. I can't see you, so I'm just going to trust you're going to do this with me. Let's take 3 breaths through your nose and out through your mouth, and follow me. Ready? Breathe in. Breathe out. Good. Breathe in. Breathe out. Good. One more time. Breathe in and breathe out. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel a lot more relaxed. So that didn't take very long, did it? And so that the next time you're about to go into a situation where you're having a conflict, you're trying to de-escalate a conflict, take those 15 seconds and do some deep breathing just to kind of center yourself. I mean, this technique has been useful for thousands of years, so it could work for you. Also, when you're in conflict, hold your judgments. And this goes back to understanding your biases. Studies have shown that as adults, we listen about 50% of the time to the other person. And teenagers, if you have teenagers, it's 75% of the time. I'm sorry, that we don't listen. So right now, half of you didn't hear what I just said. So you have to assume when you're in any communication with people, especially during a conflict, that they're not going to hear everything you said. They probably won't. So you have to clarify. It sounds to me like you're upset about this. It seems to me that this is what's bothering you. Yes, Craig, that's what it is. Often you have to break the pattern. Sometimes you just have to break the pattern. And, it all depends. You could do something crazy in a respectful way just to take the topic a little off topic for a moment. I'll tell you a funny story, at least one that made an impact on me. Years and years and years ago, I went to Tony Robbins' motivational seminar. You try to walk across the fire. And anyway, we came back into this room to debrief this thing. And there was like 1,000 people in the room. And Tony brought some woman on the stage, and she was talking about all of her problems in her life. And, she was going on and on and on and on. And in the middle of this, he said to her, "But can you burp?" And she was kind of taken aback. She said, "What do you mean, can I burp? What does that have to do with this?" He said, "I just want to know." She said, "No, I don't think so." He said, "Can you burp now?" She said, "No, I can't burp now." And she went on and on. And Tony had his assistant bring a couple of cans of 7-Up on the stage. He asked her if she would drink the 7-Up. She did. And then she went on to her discussion of all the things that was upsetting her. And it only took about 2 minutes for her to let out this huge burp. And she started laughing. The audience started laughing. And of course, what Tony was trying to do in this example, was to break the pattern, to get her just to, alter her perspective a little bit. So I'm not suggesting that you have lots of cans of soda at work, but maybe next time there's a conflict. In other words, help people break the pattern. Sometimes you might have to just take the conversation and just soften it a bit. When you're working with people under conflict, in conflict, have tolerance, show empathy, put yourself in the shoes of the other person. Imagine you or the other person having this conflict. How would you feel? What would you need, from the other person? I think it's also important, we talked about self-awareness, to strive for a personal connection. So when you're in conflict with someone, often it's as easy as just finding a connection with that other person. Like, have you ever been to a party and you end up kind of stuck talking to somebody that, you're not so interested in, and you're just looking for an opportunity to find someone else to talk to? And then in the middle of the conversation, the person says, "I don't know, I like fishing." And let's assume you like fishing. And all of a sudden you're like, "Fishing? You like fishing?" And now the two of you are together the next 3 hours talking about fishing. So often you have to strive for, a personal connection. I remember when I was a young supervisor, many, many years ago. I guess that made me young. I managed a computer room for a big company. And the first day of the job, my boss said, "Craig, go out on the floor and I want you to find," let's call him Bob. He's your senior person. Get some data from him about, how the computers are running and so on. And I said, "Okay." And one of my coworkers said, "Good luck." I said, "Why?" "Well, Bob is, I was in my late 20s. Bob is in his early 50s. He's been here 20 years. He doesn't work for anyone." I thought, this shouldn't be that bad. I walked on the floor. I saw Bob pulling cables under the floor. And I said, "Bob, I'm your new boss, Craig. Nice to meet you." He didn't even look at me. I said, "Boss, Bob, I really need some data from you." Didn't look at me. And that was it. I walked off the computer room floor. I couldn't get this guy to even look at me. I thought to myself, I am a terrible leader. And I didn't know what to do. So I thought about it all night. And the next day, a coworker came up to me and said, "Hey, I don't know if this will help, but I just want you to know that Bob likes to play golf." So I got this idea. I walked on the computer floor and I said, "Bob, I really need to talk to you." You know, he ignored me as usual. And I said, "Bob, do you want to go golfing?" He jumps up, he turns around, he looks at me and says, "Golfing? You play golf?" And I said, "Yes, of course." Now, I've never played golf, I have to admit the truth. And I said, "Yeah, maybe we could play golf someday. You know, maybe I can get you a golfing magazine. But right now, I was hoping you can give me this data." He says, "Of course." He said, "By the way, what kind of iron do you use when you play golf?" And I had no idea. I said, 18 iron? And he looked at me like, I don't know about that. Moral of the story is Bob ended up working with me for the next 10 years. He was my most loyal employee. And I think for 10 years, he kept asking me to go play golf. I think after 10 years, he probably figured out I didn't really play golf. The truth is I played golf once. I hit the ball, went backwards, and no one played with me. But anyway, my point is strive. It's a long story, but strive for a personal connection. In the end, you have, sometimes you have to disagree with people, but you always want to work to protect the working relationship. In any family, in any relationship, in any organization, there's always a common denominator, a common objective. If you look high enough, and I think when you're in conflict, it's important to find what that common denominator is. Have self-control. A lot of times when we're not self-aware, we don't have self-control. We get into a conflict, and it's difficult to deal with conflict, especially de-escalate conflict, when we don't have self-control. If that's you, you just have to practice having self-control. Maybe at night, after dinner, you want to reach for that chocolate candy bar, dark chocolate candy bar, that's sitting in the pantry. I know that feeling. And you manage not to eat it. Do that a couple times in a row, and you'll have self-control. There was a guy more in the 1960s who said, if you want to break a habit, just do something different 7 times in a row. One of the things I teach in humanistic leadership is to be high in conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a personality trait, one of the big 5 personality traits. And some of us are high or lower in some of those traits, but in an area like conscientiousness, if you're high in conscientiousness, you're a systems thinker, you're an organized thinker, you think before speaking. This is something that if you're low in conscientiousness on the personality scale, you could modify your behavior. It's really important to think before speaking. Think before you start to take action when you're in conflict. Having eye contact can also help, but you have to be careful with that. I mean, on one hand, eye contact can show that you really are paying attention to the other person, since most of what we communicate is nonverbal. But you have to be careful. For example, in certain, like in Asian cultures, to look into someone's eyes is not really appropriate. It makes people feel uncomfortable. So one thing I've learned over the years, when you're looking at someone, if you stare into their upper right eye, so if you're facing someone and you stare into their upper right eye, it creates kind of a soft glaze. It's almost like when you have a one-on-one with someone on Zoom, you're kind of not looking at them straight on. And so I think that can be helpful. When de-escalating conflict, just be respectful. And like I said earlier about having a pleasing personality, just be willing to give something up. Sometimes when you're in conflict with another person, it's not working. And you just have to say, you know what, let's take a break. Let's come back tomorrow. And, just that break, some movement, motion changes emotion. So sometimes that break can be helpful. And don't take things personally. When someone has a conflict, it's about them. It's about something that they're upset about. It's not about you personally. So especially in a work context. And finally, meet the immediate needs. At the end of the day, when someone's in conflict with you, or you're just trying to de-escalate the conflict, say things like, what do you want me to do now to help you? What can I do to help? What would you like me to do now? This is the best way to de-escalate conflict, by asking the question. The person will respond with something, and whatever they respond with, you do your best to try to meet that need if you can. So what can we learn from this short talk today. I'm looking at all of you. Commit to personal change. It really starts within all of us to be softer, kinder, more empathetic. It starts with you. You really can't lead others, unless you could lead yourself. If you're a parent or a boss, or a friend, remember that people pay more attention to what you do versus what you say. So your actions, are really important. So you are a role model here. You are a role model. I think make a plan to modify some behavior. Think about, maybe you're low in conscientiousness, which means you tend to kind of be more spontaneous. Maybe you need to do a little more planning each day, a little more deep thinking. Think about the, unintended consequences of what might happen if you take this action or say this thing. Maybe you're an extrovert and you realize that there are some opportunities where maybe you should not talk as much and listen more. So think about where you can modify some of your behavior on a regular basis. Become more aware, as I like to teach, about who you are and, why you do what you do. Think about your purpose, your values, your behavior, and try to align them. When you have an aligned roadmap, if you will, for yourself, you are present for other people. And when you're not self-aware, it doesn't mean it's bad or good or you're a right or wrong person. It just means, you're not able to be 100% present for another person. And, this is important when you're trying to deal with conflict. Lastly, don't underestimate, the personal positive influence that you have on people. For example, if you're walking down the street and you see somebody in front of you throw garbage on the street and you decide to pick it up and throw it away, there's a good chance that the person behind you is going to say to themselves, maybe I should pick up garbage next time too. So when you are a person who has a pleasing personality at home, at work, you're able to resolve conflict, and you will start to pass this on. I'm doing a workshop these days for corporations on organizations on lowering conflict, and it's amazing. When as groups of people learn these things together, they start to do this throughout the organization, and then pretty soon we have a really good learning organization. Also, smile more. I have to smile more. I always forget to smile. The most muscles we have, I think they're like over 60, are in our face, and we use them the least. Smile is ubiquitous all over the world as a kind gesture. So just smiling with people can really help. I mean, not in a creepy way, but in a nice way. Sometimes I think at the gym they should have mirrors where people work out their facial muscles, then the weights. I'm going to the gym soon, so I just thought about that. So smile more, laugh more. Dr. Cousins in the 1960s, he was dying of cancer, and he, in his last few days of a very serious terminal disease, he brought as many funny movies with him to the hospital, and he watched them. And in an experiment, his cancer went into remission. Sadly, he eventually died 6 months later of cancer. But laughter was able to slow down his cancer growth. And since then, we now understand that there is a connection between mind and body. Laughter is good. Laughter helps break the ice. Talked about meditating. It's very important. And if there's one thing I want to leave you with this morning is, start to be your own best friend. When you are your own best friend and not your own worst critic, as many of us are, we're more accepting of ourselves, and thus we're more accepting of other people. Stop trying to be perfect. Stop, trying to be better than someone else. You are unique and beautiful and perfect, just like you are. And the more you own that, if you will, lean into that, if you will be present for other people, and you will be great. You'll be great at resolving conflict. So in just a minute, I'm going to open this up. I left a little more time for discussion because I think we learned from each other. I'm just the guide. You're exploring your learning this morning about how to de-escalate conflict. I just want to let you know that I am doing I have several workshops these days I'm doing, usually on site, although they can be done over Zoom, but usually on site for organizations. One is I have a 2-hour version of this particular talk, which is very interactive, and it's meant to work on specific issues that an organization might have. So in the actual workshop, we actually go into specific issues of conflict and we look to resolve them. So I found that can be helpful when I do these. I'm also, and so that's a 2-hour workshop. I'm also giving a full day or 2 half-day workshops on the humanistic leadership model, which I call sustainability with people. Companies that take this workshop, I certify them with a logo as certified with the HLM model and as a humanistic company. And shortly I'll be listing those companies on my website. I think when people, especially the younger generations, understand and realize that a specific company is humanistic, it really helps their brand. It could boost recruitment, and retention. And then finally, I'm doing workshops these days on a topic that I've been writing about and researching for years, and that is how to enable joy at work. This is a very important topic now if we want people to bring their hearts and bodies to work. So anyway, you have my contact information here. Feel free to join me on LinkedIn. I tend to post every day ideas. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm on most other social media, at least the ones I've learned. So anyway, it's been my pleasure to speak to you today. I'm going to open it up now to any questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, we will take a few questions here. So if you have any questions for Dr. Nathanson, feel free to chime in. I'm going to ask you really quickly about your Tony Robbins story. Did you actually walk on coals?
I did. And unlike other people, my feet they didn't get burnt, but they got really hot. The mind control wasn't as good in those days.
I've always wondered, I'm like, does that actually happen? So cool. Okay, well, we'll take, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we will take those. I'm curious, what's your advice? So we have a lot of HR leaders on today. What about sort of navigating conflict maybe between two people? So maybe if you're not in that midst of that conflict, maybe helping to mediate. Do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I don't suggest mediating unless it's gotten to a point where, it really is disrupting the workplace. And I'll tell you why. Whenever you bring in a third party, mediators aren't going to want to hear this, but whenever you bring in a third party, it can help with the issue temporarily, but as soon as the mediator leaves, the two people go back to their conflict. It's like if you have 2 kids, I have 4 kids, they're all grown, but if 2 kids have a fight, you come in, you resolve it, you leave, the kids, continue to fight. So what's better, I think, is to teach people some of the ideas we spoke about today on how to work things out themselves.
Great advice. I like that. All right. Not seeing any questions right now. Oh, here we go. What's your advice when your boss is the source of conflict and tends to place blame?
Yeah, I think you have, let's see, you have 3 choices. You could wait and hope your boss leaves. So I wait 6 months. You could make a plan to leave because it's very hard to work under someone who's like that. Or 3, this might shock you. You could adapt temporarily the working behavioral style of your boss. We all like people who are like us. And if our boss sees that we are acting like they are and we support their goals, that can make the situation a little less tenuous. But I think that's short term. I think long term, it has to be one of those first 2 options. Life is short. Life moves fast, moment to moment. Work should not be wasted. So, you don't want to let this go on for too long. Or have the company take my workshop. I don't know. That's all I could think of.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we will. If there's any more questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A. Very quickly, again, we want to share Dr. Nathanson's workshop, so you can also get his contact information through myself. I'm happy to share. I did put his website in the chat for you, and we'll share this afterwards as well. But some great workshops coming up, so be sure to take advantage of those. If you've joined us today for credits, here they are. It is available for 1 credit, so I know that's a question they'll ask you. So if you want to take a moment here and jot those down, we'll leave those for a moment. We do have another question that came in. So what's the best approach to work with someone who's controlling?
Yeah, I would need some more examples, but I think I know what you mean. So you can't change another person's behavior. I mean, you really can't. So I think that my advice would be similar to the last piece of advice I gave, which is you have to work with that person. In other words, you can't change that person. And so as long as as long as you're going to work for that person, at least in the short term, I think the more tolerant you are. I mean, this is hard, right? But I think to be tolerant, to say to yourself, well, this is how they are. How can I work with this person in a way that makes it manageable here? Now, long term, that would not be a good solution. But I think short term, it goes back to having empathy and saying, obviously, this person is acting like this in a certain way. I found that real quick that people that like to lead in autocratic ways do so for one of three reasons, or controlling ways. One is when they were small, their parents micromanaged them, and now they've grown up and they're in charge of people, and that's all the behavior they know. So it's not their fault. Two is their self-esteem might be kind of low, and so you have to be careful. You don't want to be the person to shatter their self-esteem. It's not your role to improve their self-esteem. It has to come from them. That's why, you have to be able to lead yourself, before you lead other people. And third is, anytime you see a controlling manager in an organization, I usually find that their boss is also controlling, because we try to follow consciously or unconsciously those that we work for. So if that's the case, that's going to be more difficult to resolve. So the best you can do is, if you're going to stay in that situation, is try to adapt. But the bottom line is, don't ever compromise your values. So if modifying your style to fit your boss's style compromises your core values, that's going to make you sick. So you need a plan to move on. I see the next question. What happens with a person who doesn't respond well to feedback and takes things personally? I think everyone is open to coaching once trust is built, and that takes an investment in people. There are some people, for their own reasons, that are not going to be open to feedback and are going to take things personally. So with that kind of person, I think you have to ask, open-ended questions. As a coach, you're driving the bus, as I like to say, helping them get to where you want them to go. So with that person, you have to tread lightly, but never, never, never give up on coaching. I think we all appreciate coaching once trust is built. So a person who's acting defensively and is not open to coaching and, takes it personally, just realize that they have some issues going on in internal. They're not self-aware. What I would do, I would send them to a class on how to become more self-aware. Again, as I like to tell people, from my research, you can't motivate people, so stop trying. You can certainly, motivate them short term through the promise of reward and the threat of punishment. But long term, as a humanistic leader, you want to teach people how to motivate themselves. So if you're working with people that seem like they're not open to coaching, help them out. Send them on to a class on how to be more self-aware. That would be my suggestion.
Great. That's good advice. What about thoughts on micromanaging?
Well, don't do it. It's dangerous. I mean, when you micromanage people, they do exactly what you want, no more, no less. And I think that's the opposite of what we want out of people at work. You're not going to build trust if you hover over people, if you micromanage people. I found that the best behavioral styles to work with are a combination of, collaborative and democratic styles. A little bit hands off. You get in there and help when necessary, but then you kind of back out. That's my approach as a professor with students. So I think micromanagement, it might feel, that's the control part of management. It might feel like the right thing to do, but as I like to teach, remember, there's three skills of humanistic leadership. There's leading, and that's the vision part. There's managing, and that's the structural part. And there's coaching, and that's the coaching part. And they all have to come from the same person during different times of the day. The micromanagement part, however, I don't think is ever healthy. I don't see that as part of management.
I don't think anybody likes being micromanaged. Okay, what's your favorite way to de-escalate someone who comes in aggressively?
Hmm. Um, this might seem counterintuitive, but I try to match them where they are. So if you're sitting down and someone comes in, really, really angry, and stands over you, you want to stand up and show them a sense of urgency. You don't want to respond with, "Whoa, it looks like something's bothering you, Jim. Why don't you sit down?" It's like, "Jim, oh wow, I can see some, what's going on." So you want to match their emotional intensity, of course, with respect. Um, and I think just do all the things that we talked about in this talk, showing empathy, showing that you care, asking good questions. I think the bottom line is, if you want to resolve conflict quick, ask good questions, because that breaks the pattern of the other person. They have to, the mind doesn't like a vacuum. So whatever you ask it, it's gonna answer. Why am I lazy? Because. Why am I grateful? Because. So what do you need from me to resolve this conflict? The person is going to stop and think and say something. So I think, again, this is where coaching comes in. Good coaching questions.
Oh, I like that advice. Thank you.
Sure. We got 10 minutes. I love questions.
Anybody else has questions, feel free to ask them. Let's see. Recommendation to working with a person who doesn't respond well to feedback and takes things personally.
We did that one, right?
You already did that one. Okay, sorry. I was like, wait, as I read that, I was like, wait a second.
Just never give up. Never
Yes.
give up on coaching.
Okay. I don't see any more. I'm trying to filter through the chat as well, but I think you got those. And then I don't see any more in the Q&A. So if you have any other questions, we have a few more minutes. So feel free to send those in.
Again, out of this workshop, write down 3 things that you could try out in your life, right away, to help you be better at resolving conflict. Leadership is an art and it's a science. It's a science because there's lots of approaches, right? But it's also an art. You try things that resolve conflict with people, and if they work, you stick with them.
Okay. Like a few more coming in chat here. How do you deal with a narcissist personality?
You have them hang around with another narcissist. When you're low on the emotional stability scale, you're a narcissist. You're self-centered. It's all about you. That, again, I'd send that person to self-awareness training. Like, there's nothing you could do if someone tends to be lower on the emotional stability scale. You show them empathy, you show them care, but the bottom line is they have to work on themselves.
Yeah. And what's your advice for conflict that's affecting an entire department, but is kind of really between just a few people?
Yeah, so let's assume I had a group of 30 people and there's conflict in the organization, but it really is because of 2 or 3 people. I would do 2 approaches from both ends. First, I would meet individually, privately, with people that I think are involved or know about this. And as a coach, say, I've seen this, I've observed this, what's going on. Try to work with people individually. When you work with people individually and then you bring them together, they have your back. They tend to behave a little bit better. At the same time, I would have an overall meeting, like I do. I should be having an overall meeting on a regular basis with my staff. I would make sure that subtly, somewhere in my meeting, I take us back to the hopefully core values of the organization. Maybe do a little teaching about what those behaviors look like. Obviously, trying to re-emphasize why it's important for us to work together. So I would do some of that subtly to kind of send the message. At the same time, I would work with people individually. Never work with people in public. Once they lose face, they lose trust.
Yeah. It's like with working with kids too, you get that advice too about pulling them aside. So same with coworkers.
Yeah, we're all kids with big bodies. So the next time you have a conflict with someone, just shrink them down to the size of a 2-year-old and realize, children want to play, they want to have fun, they want to be heard, and so do we as adults. So if you just keep that in mind, you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I also my 3rd grader, her class starts every day with a joke. And I was like, that is such a fun way. And then to hear you say that, like
I
laugh
like
and
that.
stuff too, kind of like, I think sets the tone. I think that's part of, and there's like
That's
this
a great
critical
idea.
thinking piece too that is involved. But I was like,
That's a
maybe
great.
that's a good idea for if you're having in your department, if you want to start the day with a joke, people might.
Even if it's not a good joke, at least it's dry humor. Someone will laugh, but everybody will feel better.
Yeah, it's just like a nice way to start the day though, So anyway, thought that was a fun idea. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nathanson. Always great to have you. Always love your talks and so much great advice in this session. So feel free to reach out to Dr. Nathanson after this webinar. I'm happy to connect you via email, or you can connect with him directly via the resources we're sending out. Be sure to sign up for our next webinar. This was, again, one that was really requested was, how do we reskill? What is upskilling? What's the difference? So we're going to talk about all of that. Our speaker is amazing. I chatted with him kind of in depth about the topic. So it's definitely going to be one that you want to attend. So be sure to sign up for that. And the link should be going out soon as well via email. So if you didn't sign up for it already. And thank you all for attending today. Thank you all for hanging with us, for learning with us, and for being part of our webinar series. We really appreciate it. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you need anything else. And we'll say thank you again to Dr. Nathanson. And
change your world, change yourself, change your world. So go out there and resolve those conflicts today. And I'll be cheering for you, each step of the way.
yes, thank you so much. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good one. I'm Sierra with Star Staffing, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.